Hola amigos, hola, thanks for joining. Muchas gracias, thanks for your participation. My name is Vanessa Vasquez, I am your Lima City guide, and today we have a meeting with culture, with literature, with Latin American literature. We are going to be talking about one of the most famous, most international Peruvian books made by a local author, a Peruvian author, Clorinda Matto de Turner. This lady, a Peruvian woman, was not born in Lima. She was born in Cusco. Cusco, this cradle, the crypt of the Incas, the place of origin of the Incas, is also place of origin, home of wonderful writers, artists, composers, musicians. And Clorinda Matto was not just a fabulous writer, she was as well a feminist, one of the first feminists we had in Peru, and she was a fighter for social justice. So in today's event, I wanted to share with you all the story of her most famous book. It was a novel actually, and this novella is considered a short novel of about 200 pages long. It is one of the most also insightful stories that gives you an idea about the reality of the life in the Andes for the indigenous. Also, the big differences, social differences between the indigenous and the white people. So this story that I'm going to be telling you, it is also very sad, but as well, let me just put everything in context. It is a story that takes place in the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century. So thank you so much for your participation. We are about to start this event. And the reason why I've chosen this part of the city, by the way, you can see here the hills, the mountains. We are trying to transport you into the context of the Andes for a little while, because in a short while we're going to get into the historic center of Lima, and there you're going to have the chance of experiencing something very different, a different vibe. And today we're going to talk about the contrast between the life of the Andes, also in the 19th century, and the life as a white person in the more urban, let's say, atmosphere, right? So we are next to Rimac River. By the way, look at the color of the river. This color represents that we are having rains in the Andes. The color of the river turns this gray when we are having lots of rains in the mountains. We are in the coast of Peru. So in the coast of Peru, we don't have rain actually. The coast is a desert. But we need this water also here in the coast for irrigational purposes. Sometimes we have floatings also thanks to the heavy rains in the Andes. So this water is loaded with lots of material like mud, for example, from the mudslides that happen in this season in the Andes. So now we're going to start with this tour, and I want to first start showing you the picture of the lady in question, the one that created this novel. The name of the novel I'm going to be referring about is Aves sin nido in Spanish, or Birds Without a Nest. And here, let me now turn the camera to you. There is a lot of sunshine, but I think we're going to be able to see briefly the face of this lady. She is the novelist Clorinda Matto de Turner. When we use that "de" is because she was married. She was married to Mr. Turner. He was a European man, an Englishman, who married her. She a Cusqueña, he a man of world. They live here in Peru. and they actually support each other a lot. Especially he supported her writing career and all her life. So we will continue now walking just a little bit, and let me tell you a couple of things while I'm also trying to find another image that I want to share with you. So just give me a second. So Clorinda Matto de Turner was a Peruvian lady who visited different parts of the country. Back then in the 19th century, it was not usual that women would travel that much as she did. She even came to Lima. She visited Lima and lived in Lima for a period of time. In the period of the, it was the 70s of the 19th century. So she was very, very fascinated about the life in Lima and the contrast between the Andes and, the capital, right? So she was born in a family of landowners, and she had certain level of wealth. But being honest, she was not very rich. She just came from a comfortable, let's say, economical condition, and she, thanks to that, was able to be well educated enough to have access to literature from the world, and also to explore herself later what would be, becoming a writer, right? So you need to have certain economical comfort for becoming a writer, especially in that period of the time. So possibly in that early age of her life, when she was living in the mountains, in the more rural environment, and she was able to get in touch with the indigenous of the community where she lived. She lived in Tinta, in Cusco. She realized about the terrible gaps, the mistreatments that the indigenous received from the landowners, and especially the fair-skinned people, the light-skinned people, right? So this is, by the way, the entrance into the historic center of Lima. This bridge is called Puente Trujillo, and this is the official entrance into the downtown of the city. And we're going to start seeing some really nice buildings here in this section. So, as I was saying, Clorinda was a feminist of her days and a fighter for social justice. So she got lots of enemies in her life, lots of enemies. Most of the enemies she had mocked her because she was from the province, because she had a very strong Cusquenian accent, because she was not able to bear children. She was not able to have children in her life, which was possibly something that made her very sad. But in that period of the life, of the history of the world, like 19th century, if you were not able to have children, you were considered to be, as a woman, useless, right? So her enemies talk really, really badly about her, and this is why also she became an ambassador, they say, of the cause for equality for women, because women were just valid, important, as long as they could have children, as long as they could, produce heirs for their husbands, right? So it is indeed sad. This story also has changed a lot in Peru, but we needed women like her for producing these changes. So Clorinda, also another interesting detail is that she got so many enemies that eventually, due to some political changes in the 1890s, in the 90s of the 19th century, she had to escape from Peru. She was persecuted. Her businesses were destroyed. Her books were burned. She was hated completely by the, let's say, the traditional male, circle of writers of that period. And in one reason of this big hatred she received was because of the book we are going to be discussing, Birds Without a Nest. Okay, so she died in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, And there in Buenos Aires is where her tomb is located. It is indeed very sad seeing that one of the most important writers of Peru, and look at here, this is nowadays we have actually, her body was repatriated later and now is in Cusco, right? But she was in Argentina for a long period of time in a cemetery there, La Recoleta cemetery there, right? So now we will continue in this direction. And well, I have some images that I would like to share, but the sun is today very strong, so I'm sure you will not be able to see many of these images. So anyways, I want to now tell you also a little bit about the story of Aves Sin Nido, which is her book. And Aves Sin Nido is considered to be Birds Without a Nest, the first novel pro the indigenous, as a, let's say, a public, we say, denuncia, which is called about the terrible state the indigenous receive in the Andes. So, for example, in the American version, in the version that you can find in English, made in the United States of the book, translated into that language, in the back cover, you can read also the following. Let me just read a little bit of what is there. It's some words from her about the indigenous people. So she wrote, "I love the native race with a tender love, and so I have observed its customs closely, enchanted by their simplicity, and as well the abjection into which this race is plagued by small town despots, who, while their names might change, never fail to live up to their epithet of tyrants. They are no other than, in general, the priests, governors, caciques, and mayors." Right? So this is basically part of what you're going to be finding here in this book. This is the part, the most important part about what she tries to tell everybody about what she was observing in the Andes. The title in English, Diana, is Birds Without a Nest. In Spanish, Aves Sin Nido. It's the exact translation of this, the name of the book in Spanish. And here we can see also, let me show you. Maybe you can see it better. So I think the images are not so very clear. But this is the name, Birds Without a Nest, 1889, the year of creation of this book. So well, I hope you are seeing well, because in my end, the light is so strong that I cannot see very well the images in the screen. So thank you, Diana, for your question. So well, let's talk about the story of the book. And also I have chosen the route today in the Historic Center to talk about the characters of this book. For example, we have the first characters that are very important, the Marin family. So the story happens in a town called Quillac. This town actually does not exist. It was invented by Clorinda. So Quillac, the way how she describes Quillac would be pretty much like this, right? So you can see a town in the Andes, a little town in the Andes with small houses, mountains around, so very, very elevated also. So this is the way how she describes the town might look like, Quillac. This was an invented, let's say, town. She didn't want to use the name of one town only because she believed that it was the reality spread over in the mountains. of these mistreatments towards the indigenous. So the story starts when a couple from Lima, the Marin family, and the Marin family also is, let's say, a couple of well-educated people from the city. So we're talking about people that are very young, looking for an opportunity to make a life in the mountains. So Mrs. Lucia and Mr. Fernando are both well-educated people who, the husband of Fernando works in the mining business, right? So they go to the mountains to start a new life. They are just newlyweds. So they realize about the tragic lives of the indigenous there, the big social gap. So the story is really interesting because it's like this family Marin, they are the moralizing subjects of the story. So here you can see, like this, of course, they are characters, that invented by Clorinda, but I just want to give you an idea of how possibly in their imagination, in her imagination, these characters look like. So a young couple, right? So, yes, Dunia in a valley. That's right. That's the way, how she describes also that location, Kiyak. So, they go to this town and they meet a family of indigenous, the Yupanqui family. The Yupanqui family. Yupanqui is a very, very indigenous last name, which is very popular also in Peru. So these characters get in touch with them because of a tragic situation that the family Yupanqui passed through. So the Yupanquis, as most of the indigenous, lived with very, very limited resources, right? So it was very common that, for example, in that time when someone got ill, they had to ask for loans, not to banks, of course, to landowners, to important people, the white people, right, of the town. So that was the case. For example, for this family, they needed to ask for a loan. So the problem was not the loans. The problem was the interests that they had to pay, right? So, unfortunately, after a time, they were not able to pay immediately the money, so the interests got bigger and bigger, and a way for this landowner to ensure that the family would return the money plus the interests was stealing one of the daughters of the Yupanqui family. So this landowner took one of the daughters of them, the youngest one, the little one, which was, back then she's described as a 4-year-old child, very, very young child. By the way, this is the Church of St. Dominic. It's open for service. So I'm going to get a little bit closer there too, for you to see just a little bit better. So, this landowner stole the daughter of the family Yupanqui, and the mother was desperate. So she saw the young couple of newcomers, and she believed that maybe they could help her. So when she knocked the door of the house of the Marin, Lucia was alone. So she received this lady, and she learned about the story of the kidnapping of her baby. So, she said, no worries, I'm going to talk to the authorities. I will talk to the priests. That's why also we are here in the church. Look at the beauty of the church of St. Dominic, all the wealth of the church as well. And this was also the same situation of the churches in the little towns in the old days, right? The churches had always gold, always silver. There was so much wealth in them, of course, according to the possibilities of the town, but always the most decorated buildings were the churches, of course, because, the idea was that the gold will make happier death, right? The silver will make happier God. So you will give everything to the church, meaning that the church does not need it really like too much, right? Because there were resources, but the church also continued receiving the taxes from the people every time there was made, for example, a mass for the dead, or every baptized, or everything that was related with services offered by the church had to be paid, right? So, which is also the case of why people in this story got, let's say, lease with these landowners to return money, because they are always needing money. They don't have enough for them, and also to cover their other responsibilities, right? Also, they needed to give part of their food, of the products they grew, to the to landowners, for example, they work with, and it was like extenuating for them all. So well, then the story continues when Lucia talks to the other important characters of the story. Which ones are the other characters of this story? For example, we have the priest, Pascual Vargas. So the priest, which is an authority, very important, with also the governor, the mayor Pancorbo, Sebastián Pancorbo, they are both the most important authorities, and as well as being important authorities, they, well, in the eyes of Lucia, they could give a solution to this problem. But these authorities, when they talked to her, they, well, thought that this lady was trying to change their ways, was trying to change their traditions, and they hated completely that idea. So this is why they left the house of Lucia basically with no intention of helping the child, and they just said, well, this is the ways of our people, right? So you, as a newcomer, you cannot, tell us what to do. So this is also why we came in direction to see the church, right? Because the churches can be sometimes so beautiful, so huge, so wealthy, but in the old days especially, the church turned their backs to the indigenous. They mistreated them terribly, especially in the little towns, maybe not in the big city, but in the big towns especially, right? So, well, we continue also with this story, and so Lucia talks to her husband, and he is such a sweetheart. He's a really nice person. So he gives money to Mr. Yupanqui to get her daughter back. So at the end, after some adventures, they get the daughter back, but already all the people of the city hate this couple, the marine couple, right? So this is really interesting, no? It says that the story tries to say that we could do something, right, to change like the situation always, but always the fear at the end is what can happen with you later, right? So everybody conspirates against the marine family, even creating all a story in which the community believed that the Marines would be bad for the community, and they attacked the house of the Marine. And finally, Mr. Yupanqui, that tries to protect the Marines, is killed in this revolt. So, well, the wife of this gentleman, she is very ill from this attack as well, and she asked to the Marine family to take care of her daughters, right? So this story is also sad because the daughters, the young daughters, they lose their parents due to this attack they received. And the Marines also, they adopt the child because they don't have children of their own, indigenous children. And well, the story in that point ends with the revealing of a secret that Mrs. Yupanqui tells to Lucia. right? So, which is at the end of the story, at the very end of the story, the determinant factor of the story. So, this secret, she says, don't tell anyone until it's the moment when it's necessary. So, well, one of the daughters of the Yupanqui family is represented as a very beautiful girl, like described as a very, very beautiful indigenous girl. So, well, a new character comes also, the son of the governor. And the son of the governor is represented as a good man, as a really good person, and also he is represented as sort of like the Romeo of the story in a way, right? So well, he falls in love of Margarita Yupanqui, which is the oldest daughter of the Yupanquis. And he, of course, wants in the story to marry her. He is actually an adopted son for the mayor of the town of Quillac, Mr. Sebastián Pancorbo. And it is the father, the genetic father of this young boy is not revealed until the end of the story again. So, well, in the story, we see elements of, for example, abuse from the church towards the indigenous, sexual abuse, for example. We have also the terrible presence of the white men trying to oppress the indigenous, but also what we see is an infantilization of the indigenous. So the indigenous are seen as that they don't have any power, they are powerless, they are like little children, right? The end of the story, which is also very sad, when finally the Marine said they cannot stay any longer here because they are terribly mistreated, right? They cannot stay longer in Quillac, so they say, we have to go. Also, this is because Lucia learns that she's pregnant, right? So, when they are going away with the daughters of the Yupanqui that they have adopted, well, finally, the handsome man of the story, you know, he says, I want to marry Margarita. No, we're talking about Manuel, no, the adopted child of the Governor Sebastián Pancorbo. So he says, I want to marry Margarita. I want to make her my wife. And the family said, well, that's something really good. But he said, well, I just want you to know who is my father. Because my actual father was not the Governor Pancorbo. So they said, well, tell us who's your father. And he said, well, it's the bishop. And the expression of Lucia is of terrible sadness, because Lucia Marin knows the secret of the true father of the beautiful Margarita, which was as well the bishop, which was, of course, product of a let's say, abuse, right? So a rape, right? So the story ends with the beautiful Lucia Marin saying, when she see also these lovers crying desperately, she says, poor children, they are like birds without a nest, right? And the story ends there. It's a sort of like a short novel. Here, by the way, we are seeing the beautiful city hall of Lima, also home of the authorities, right? In the colonial times, also the same home of the authorities. And here in the distance, I took you to this location to see briefly the changing of guards, which is the very first time I'm showing everybody here a little bit of the changing of guard and the music that happens in the main square of Lima, with a little bit more of people's presence, because before in other occasions that I've been here with you all, the square has been completely closed to tourists because of the pandemic, but now things are little by little going back to a normality. So, well, as a conclusion of this story, Birds Without a Nest was a novel that mix melodramatic moments that of extreme romanticism, with moments in which the author wants to be taken seriously, like wants to talk about the terrible situation of the indigenous. She combined these two elements. So the story has lots of like contradictions for moments. It's full of contradictions. It has lots of twists in which the author like maybe thinks that she's giving too much romanticism, and then turns in direction of telling you something brutal about, for example, the story of the abuses of the church, right, or the stealing of the children, etc. Right. So this is why I consider this story a must for you if you want to understand the history of Peru as a whole, right? So, well, the Birds Without a Nest, it's also translated into different languages. English, of course, was the first language translated after, like its original one, Spanish. And we don't have, for example, a movie about it. It's actually almost a forgotten book. Children don't anymore read Birds Without a Nest, but in a time, especially around the 1940s, 50s, time of the birth of the love for the indigenous traditions, the indigenismo period, that is the moment of let's say, the biggest fame of this book. I'm seeing also a question, Dunia, thanks for asking, was the novel seen in good light or banned from the publication? Dunia, excellent question. It was banned completely. When Clorinda Matto de Turner, she is persecuted in the 1890s, and that's why she left to Argentina, and she died in Argentina. All her publications, including this one, were burned publicly. The church completely opposed to it, because this was a very, very like straightforward, sort of like a negative advertisement of the church. You need to have, like a very, very, there is a way to say it in English, right? You need to have something, to be that bold and talk out loud, especially as a woman, no? Women, in general, were not able to talk about these things publicly back then. She didn't care. She had nothing to lose. She wanted to do something for women, something for the indigenous, and that's why she's called the first feminist of her generation, and also the first female defender of the indigenous publicly, right? Diana, yes, you can buy the book in Amazon. You can buy it like a hardcover, paperback, I think it's called. And also you can buy it, let's say, in digital option. So I read the book digital. In Spanish, you can also find it in Spanish for free. I'm going to share with you, if you wish, in my media, the link for free in Spanish, but I don't think the English version is for free. So was her husband supporting her ideas? Yes, Liz, indeed. Honestly, Mr. Turner, he was a very avant-garde gentleman, not usual for the time that a man would support such strong-tempered women. And maybe because he was European, he was like that. Maybe that's why also her relation was also very, very long. Unfortunately, he died before her because, well, of some, let's say, complications, health complications during a very hard period of Peru, the time of the Chilean invasion. So it was a time of sadness. It was 1881 when he died, so far I remember, time of the invasion. But she, alone after that, was able to continue working in her books. And finally, her book, Birth Without a Nest, came after the passing of her husband, but he supported her unconditionally until his death. So, Diana, horrible, in the name of the religion, in the U.S. some organizations are banning books. Yeah, oh, interesting, Diana. Well, in Peru, this book is, of course, not anymore banned. It's one of the classics, but it's not in the curricula, which I think it should be. It should be, but maybe because of the mentions of the sexual abuses might possibly be the reason why they are not, maybe using this excuse, they are not more publicized, right? Still the country has a strong, let's say, inclination towards the church. This is the cathedral, by the way. Look at the beauty of the Cathedral of Lima. And although Peru is what we call a laico country, which means like secular, I think it's called. So we are not Catholic oriented, but still we have very, very, we relay a lot in the church, in the opinions of the church. So I read the book for when you first recommended it. Very brave to her to plainly portray the church so plainly. Oh, Caitlin, thank you so much. Well, just knowing that you were able to read the book, it makes my day because, well, it's a piece of history, especially brought by a woman, and what an important let's say addition to the history of the nation. A lady that was so bold and brave to picture the reality of the mistreatments of the powerful ones in that period. Did she write other important books? Yes, Liz, novels. But one that I know that was also very famous is about traditions of Cusco. So we have for example, Tradiciones Peruanas from Ricardo Palma, which is a wonderful book. He was one of his mentors, and she continued with that same idea of recollecting traditions from her town, from Cusco, and she made a book about that. If you wish, also, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more of information of books, not just from her, also from women of her generation. And I think, well, this is a very good starting for you to know more about literature of Peru, right? So possibly in another occasion, I'm going to be talking about Mario Vargas Llosa, which is a more famous Peruvian writer and also winner of a Nobel Literature Prize. So I'm going to be commenting about the next book also in a post, but it's going to be The Time of the Hero. So The Time of the Hero is also a really interesting portrait of the reality of Peru in the, let's say, beginnings of the 20th century, 1930s, 1940s, right? So we're going to be having the chance of chatting a lot about a different period, of course. Muchas gracias, Liz. Thank you so much for your deep support. You know how much it helps to continue doing these events. These are free tours. They are free to join, free to participate, and just support it with your tips. And also I share the tips with Hego. This is something we all guys do. So a percentage of the tips goes to the platform to help them to continue growing. Caitlin, muchas gracias. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I know it's been a very small audience today, but I am always very, very honored, like, to be with 1, 2, 3, no worries. I am always here for you all. And even better when we are a small group, so I can answer all the questions make it more insightful, more personal. Diana, muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope you can join me later at noon. I'm going to be doing another tour about religion. It's going to be about the faith of the Peruvians. So we're going to discuss about Peruvian saints, Peruvian traditions. It's going to be also very interesting. Take care, my friends. See you later. And have a lovely Sunday. Best to you all from Lima, Peru, with this very nice background music from the National Army of Peru. Gracias, Caitlin. Thank you. And well, it was my first time. I hope you really enjoy it. I wanted to do something special. Sorry if I had some mistakes or something was not perfect. I'm going to keep improving also these shows every time. Best to you all. Bye-bye. Thank you.